Welcome to Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness Podcast, a Mentalus Academy production. Let's learn more about ourselves, inside and out.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast called Inside Out, where we talk about all things mental health and wellness. And each podcast, we have someone on who's talking to us about a specific topic. So today I'm very happy to have Eliane here with us, who has chosen to talk about the topic of relationships and how relationships can be a mirror to ourselves. So welcome, Eliane, and thank you very much for being here today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about why you chose this topic and why it means something to you.
Well, there was a list of different topics, and out of the entire list, the one that actually caught my eye was relationships are a mirror. And so just to go back a little bit, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I have finished basically a good part of my life with what is your responsibility towards your family and your responsibility towards your work and so on. I had a successful career in travel, and that continues on into my life now. I travel every chance I get. My family, which I adore to pieces, my daughter, my granddaughter, and we travel together as many times as we can. They also have their limitations with school and work and whatnot. And so the focus in my life now has become basically friends and travel. The rest is just mundane. It's like taking care of the everyday and, oh, I got to do this, oh, I got to do that, so on and so forth. But basically, I live to travel and enjoy every minute with my friends. So, and with that comes the advantages and disadvantages. There are some great times, and then especially when you travel, there are some not so good times, or at least I should say more like challenges that come up when you travel. And when they say, if you want to know someone, travel with them, it's absolutely true. So that's why I chose that topic. So I guess my first question, I wanted to actually understand the terminology of what did you mean by relationships are a mirror? What does it mean exactly before I get into where I think this is going?
You see, when we said that, what we meant, because usually we kind of repeat the same patterns we have with everybody, especially when we get close to those people. The more intimate we are, and I think travel in that sense gets us to be intimate with people because like we're together in them 24/7. But we kind of repeat the same patterns we know, we're familiar with, we're comfortable with, or we're uncomfortable with.
I think the other part of that too is that, so just as Nedzin said, our relationships and our relationship patterns are set pretty early in life. Like our families are the first people that we have relationships with. So those become our templates later in life. So particularly when we have either a close friendship with someone, or like Nedzin said, when the friendship or the relationship becomes more intimate, so you're now in close quarters together, or you're even in work settings sometimes, because you do spend a good 8 hours a day, the majority of your day with these people, you end up seeing patterns repeat themselves from these very early relationships. And these people, unbeknownst to them and even unbeknownst to you, might actually trigger those patterns all over again.
Yeah. I would say in that respect, Daniela, I would follow up with that because people have resemblance to our family growing up. Maybe it's the character, maybe it's how they speak, maybe it's how they move, maybe it's just how they hold themselves, you see? And that the triggers Daniela is talking about are some of that on unconscious level. I kind of connect with that familiarity I have with the people I grew up with, whether it's a good familiarity or a bad one. And unconsciously, we kind of set that behavior according to which direction we're taking.
Okay. Well, that's absolutely true. I just immediately made a connection in my mind in one particular relationship. But I was going to say that the feelings that it brings up in you that actually makes you behave a particular way or another way, at the other end, the same thing is happening, right? So you have your situation that comes up in the background, and then you have the other person that has their situation come up in the background. And sometimes it can end up being catastrophic in the end. But I've always been of the mind that you need to give it time. You need to actually give it a chance to work through the challenges that come up. But on occasion, it's actually that time that is given has come back and bit me in the rear, to be frank, and because it was too long in the end. And I mean, you realize at one point or another that it's just not going to work out. No matter what, it's just not going to work out. You can advise the other person, you can tell them, listen, this is not good. I don't particularly like it when you do this thing or that thing. And the person can acknowledge it. And for a period of time, they can try to correct themselves, correct course if you want, but it doesn't last. Eventually, it comes back up again. So I guess the next question I would have is those unconscious patterns that, be it healthy or unhealthy at times, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that in the best way possible? I guess that would be the question.
I think that, first of all, it takes a certain amount of recognition of those patterns. The mere fact that they're unconscious means that we don't see them until we do. I think what you're describing, Eliane, is if you have that discussion with someone and they modify their behavior for a certain amount of time, that's kind of like symptom relief, right? That's like if you have a fever, you take an aspirin, your fever goes down, but it doesn't attack the underlying cause. So,
Mhm.
what that person or what each of us needs to do is kind of sit back and take stock of ourselves and say, well, what am I bringing to this equation and what's being triggered in me? And what might I be doing that's triggering the other person that I may not be aware of? That requires a bit of work. Like it's not something that you can do overnight. And it's often not something that you can do on your own because it's a blind spot. So you don't see what you don't see.
Mhm.
So that in the case of a friendship or a relationship, it takes both sides to be able to say, okay, you know what? We really want to explore this. We really want to get down to what's going on beneath the surface. Not always obvious when you're talking about a short term situation like travel or spending a lot of time with someone for a short amount of time.
Potentially this happens. Potentially some people that are really, really close for a very, very long time may hold on to the relationship enough to want to work through with the help of someone. But in general, a friendship is a friendship, and you kind of wonder how much work do you have to put in to make it a better and a better situation. And it's not all bad, it's not all good. So you may have 60, 70% of the time where it's good, and you may have 30% of the time where it's difficult to get through. But and I'm not just talking about myself, I've seen it. There's other people out there who basically face the same challenges.
Well, often what happens in those situations is that the person in question, if they start to see that this is happening over and over again, it's not so much a question of two friends saying, okay, we're going to work through this and get some help. It's more that the person at some point may realize that this keeps happening.
Mm-hmm.
The same pattern keeps happening with a whole bunch of different people. And at a certain point, if the common denominator is you have to say, well, okay, what am I doing that's causing this? And that may get them to reach out and say, okay, this is something I want to work on.
Yeah. Which may in the end not have anything to do with the friends. It really does have something to do with yourself. And potentially there is a need there. But again, I'm wondering, and once again, I mean, I don't think that life is perfect, right? I mean, life is not perfect. It comes with its package of good things and bad things. When do you start to go down the path of saying, okay, I really need help here. It's just not working. One of the things that you probably will do is to look around and see how is everybody else handling life in general. And if you see that, you're within the median, you tend to say, well, it is what it is. That seems to be how it works out there with everyone. So you kind of shy away from, do I really need to go and get help on this or not?
That goes back to what I was going to say. You see, it takes the person to acknowledge that, oh, there is a problem. Because the other person or even ourselves, sometimes we might be repeating the pattern, we might be going in the same road, but we're not aware of it. So, yeah, we might say, but until there is a real presence and a real intention to look there, what is my blind spot? What is happening? Do I really want to put the work into it? Because I mean, yeah, you need even to have the intention to look around and see how it's going with others. Some people are just fine with who they are and how they are, and they go on with their own life, maybe according to where they stand or oblivious of others, depending on lots of factors, I would say. But it takes that mindfulness moment to say, oh, there is something wrong. And acknowledging emotions, acknowledging how do we feel, acknowledging how we make others feel as well, because it's not just me. If I can see somebody else, something I said triggered someone else, it takes me to be present to myself and to the other person to see, oh, yeah, I might have done something wrong.
So you're right. I think that there is a level of intensity of each person too. There are some people who basically float by all of that stuff and they couldn't be bothered. I had the perfect example in my life. My husband was like that. He passed away 4 years ago now, but he was quintessentially Mr. Teflon. I mean, nothing stuck to him, no matter what. And very often I would be completely the opposite, very intensely discussing a situation and saying, did you see that? And do you understand that? And so on and so forth. And he would say, I don't understand why it bothers you so much. It has nothing to do with you. It really has to do a lot more with the other person than with yourself, And he brought a certain wisdom and balance to my life, which I needed, which I really did need at that time. And so that intensity is key, I think, in how we react to situations as well.
I would say sensitivity also, because we can be sensitive and intense, or just sensitive and less intense. It's the intensity in how we feel things, how we experience them, and having the sensitivity to be aware of them.
So aside from seeking help to discover what your blind spots are and managing them, are there other ways that you would suggest or recommend to avoid what you attract to a certain extent?
Daniela?
Oh, you looked like you were about to say something, so I didn't want.
I went very deep in my answer. I was like, you stop there. Let her take that.
So sorry, Daniela, I repeat my question maybe a different way. So how do you avoid, at the end of the day, how do you avoid what you attract?
Again, the first thing, it goes back to being aware. So you have to be aware of the pattern of what you attract. So like we said earlier, somebody might say like, oh, I have an issue because this keeps happening to me. Like my friends suddenly feel like they've had enough of me after a while. Why does that keep happening? But similarly, the opposite could also be true, is why do I keep attracting people who, let's say, for example, drain all my energy and don't give anything back? Like what's going on there? Why does this keep happening to me? Where did that pattern begin for me? Like, oh, maybe I was the caretaker in my own family of origin and I was the one who had to take care of everybody else's needs. Oh, okay, like now it starts to make sense. Then beyond that, how do you stop it? Well, if you don't see it, you can't stop it. That's number one. Number two, once you see it, then it becomes a question of setting boundaries. It becomes an issue of being able to say, okay, how much do I want to give to this particular person? How much time, how much energy, what kind of a relationship do I want with them? And understanding that you don't have to give all of yourself to everybody. So Nedzin, you want to go further down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, I mean, I kind
But
of made
it kind of goes back to the intensity part, right? So if you're an intense person, you tend to go all in. You know, I don't have around me, I have very little. I would tell you probably less than 10% of the people that are around me are floating people. I don't have that. I have real relationships with the people that are in my life. So the intensity is there, that you like it or not. That's part of your character. That's who you are. And I don't think that I could, not that I wouldn't want to, but I don't think that I could change that.
Hey everyone, we hope you are enjoying this podcast. Want to find out more about this topic and much more? Check out our courses at Mentalist Academy. Find out more at www.mentalistacademy.com. And now, back to our podcast.
I would say, in regard of your question, how would I avoid attracting what I attract?
Yes.
If we are still attracting those people, it's because it is still serving a purpose in my perspective. So I would go in the same way Daniela said it. I would give it another turn. What purpose is it still serving? Why are you still attracting those people? Because avoiding that can be hard when we are still needing something from this. So if I'm attracting those kind of people, what am I getting from this also? It's not just what am I repeating. What is it that I'm getting, or what is it that I'm avoiding?
I absolutely. And that's it, these relationships. And that's why it's difficult to put an end sometimes to them, is because they do bring something to your life. Absolutely. You are attracted to people who basically are going down the same path as you in life. They've gotten a particular time in their journey where they're going to do the same thing as you. They're going to be traveling. They have the freedom to do that. They're interesting people. And it's not to say that these people are bad people. There's a lot of good things that attract you to them and so on. But that, like I said, that 30% that you have to deal with sometimes overshadows the 70%. And it is not by choice that you would want to sever the relationship, but it comes and gets you at a deep level. And it just, I would even go as far as saying it's not necessarily you per se. It would come and get anybody out there. The behavior is, from everything that I read, everything that I see on Facebook, on TikTok, in the newspapers, and in interviews that are being given, right? There's a lot of people who basically accept things and then eventually say, no, no more, no more, I can't anymore. And you are being driven down that path. If you've set the boundaries, as Daniela was saying, and they're continuously being crossed, then at one point or another, you have to do what you have to do. At the same time, it doesn't change how you feel. It doesn't change that part of you that attracts it or deals with it on a regular basis. So
You mentioned intensity, and you said, I can't stop from being intense. It's who I am, it's part of my character. But there's a big difference between not being intense, let's say, or toning down the intensity, and boundaries. You can be intense and still have very solid boundaries.
Or the opposite, intense with no boundaries.
And you can
yes.
also be intense and have no boundaries. And at the same time, so what happens there is, like you said, if you set those boundaries and they keep being crossed, and you say, well, at a certain point, there's nothing more I can do. Correct. You don't control the other person. The other person has to be able to respect those boundaries, but it doesn't actually stop you from being your intense self, if you will, while still continuing to reinforce those boundaries.
All right.
And if you're still getting a lot out of the relationship, then maybe that's something to consider, to make those boundaries. Maybe you think the boundaries are solid, but they're actually not solid enough. You could be telling the person, hey, I don't like when you do that, but unless it's literally etched in stone, if that person has a habit of transgressing boundaries, that's not going to be enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. 100%. And that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, is that they have their problems, their own issues to deal with. And so it comes up in every part of their life. And of course, you're in it, so you're part of it.
Well, and having worked with couples for decades, and couples, I mean, couples is one thing, yes, but friendships are also like couples. Any relationship really could be looked at as a couples relationship. What I've noted is that it's a dynamic between two people. It's never like one person. So if one person is doing something, the other person is responding in a certain way, and it's the dynamic between the two of them that sets it up.
Right.
There's an acceptance of certain things, there's certain things not being said, there's all kinds of things that go on, and that's where the mirror part comes in, because it just keeps repeating itself until we examine it and do something about it. We'll find it in all aspects of our lives. Like if we're the type of person that has very open boundaries and people tend to cross boundaries, that's going to happen in your romantic relationship, in your work relationships, in your friendships. It's everywhere.
It's also how we deal with boundaries and how we deal with what comes around boundaries. How do we deal with emotions? How do we deal with communication? It's all of that. You see, for some people, saying things directly on the spot can be their way of communication. For others, no, they need to set time and let's discuss it while it triggers the other. So there is a lot into that, how we express, how we feel our emotions, how comfortable are we saying them or not. As Daniela said, all relationships are dynamics and it gets conflictual sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that part of the issue is there as well. In other words, those open boundaries that Daniela is referring to is usually how a relationship starts, right? You have open boundaries. You're waiting to find out a little bit what the other person is made of. And often it's in little things. You don't have a blowout in the initial stages of a relationship, because if you do, then you just walk away from it. You say, oh my God, no, 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 no. I didn't sign up for this. But so there are little things that happened and that you tend to, in the setting of relationships and thinking that everybody's grown up here, and there are certain things that are done and there are certain things that are not done. You kind of believe that the other person is on the same wavelength, and those little flashes that you get here and there, you see them, but you ignore them, or you decide not to deal with them because it could be an isolated incident. It could be just the moment. It could be something that is going on in the other person's life that is making them behave in that particular way. If you know a little bit of the dynamic in the life of that person, you say, okay, it's not a good day for her because of that. And you kind of let go and let go and let go until all of a sudden you yourself find yourself in a position of actually, you don't necessarily realize how far in you are. You've been pulled into this to the extent that it's now completely reversed. You're actually pushing through the relationship. You're the ones who was actually wanting to continue the relationship. You're the ones who's pushing through this until all of a sudden every fiber in your body basically says, stop, stop. And then at that point, you make the decision that, nah, it's just not going to work, you know?
Making me think of something called the sunk cost fallacy, which is the more time and energy you invest in something, the less likely you are to then pull out. So the classic example is you're on a call waiting for customer support. And you're on hold and on hold. And for the first 5 minutes, you're like, oh, this is taking too long. I'm going to hang up. Then you stay on. And then after 10 minutes, you're like, well, I've already stayed on 10 minutes. They're probably going to take my call next. So you keep staying on. Now it's 20 minutes, half an hour. It's ridiculous. But now you've invested a half hour already. So you're really going to stay on. And sometimes that's what happens with relationships and friendships too, is you start to think like, okay, well, we've been friends for, I don't know, 10 years. This has always bugged me. It's getting worse, but you know what? We've been friends for so long, or I can't pull out now. So that happens in relationships too. And that's, you talked about intensity. That's part of the intensity too, because if you're an intense person, you don't really want to give up. You don't want to walk.
You're right. Right. Yeah, exactly. So if I go back to the initial question, which was relationships are a mirror, can you go a little bit further into that? What does the mirror reflect?
The mirror actually reflects both ways in my perspective. Let's say this is the mirror, it reflects me and my pattern, and it reflects the other and their pattern, and how the dynamic gets combined. And then it keeps reflecting that over and over and over again. And sometimes until one of us stops, and sometimes never stop. I've seen couples like they die together and they're bickering every day. This is their dynamic, you see. So sometimes you find balance in this unbalanced situation, but I mean, this is what I was trying to say. It's what is giving me. If what is giving me is fulfilling me emotionally, even the fight kind of makes us stay, you see. So this is how I find mirrors in relationships. I don't know
Okay,
if it
thank
makes
you.
sense for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you touched on something important, Edzin, which is in any relationship, the way I like to think about it is there's actually three entities. There's the two people, and then there's the couple, let's call it, whether it's a couple, friends, whatever it is. Imagine that those two people linked together actually form a new entity. And each one brings their own patterns and their own baggage into that. And then that replays something. So that becomes a mirror of an old pattern or an old relationship if you take the time to look at it. And each one may be seeing something different in that mirror based on what their experiences are. But sometimes it helps to just think of it as almost like a third entity that you're now observing, which is not you, it's not the other person, but it's what happens when the two of you combine.
Get together. Yeah.
Almost,
Yeah.
sodium and chloride, you combine them together, you get salt.
Yeah. Right. But there's an element of love, I suppose. I mean, in the bigger term of love, where do you realize that you are hurting the other person or vice versa? And does that matter to you? Or do you just keep ramming right through? And even though you may have these little moments where you realize, oh, that wasn't very nice of me. Again, they don't last, right? So go right back to the patterns. So where does love, I guess, like I said, in the bigger sense of the word, where does it fit in? I mean, shouldn't it have priority in the relationship over my wants or her wants or his wants, or shouldn't that be in the forefront of the relationship to sort of guide how you behave with the other person? Do you say things that are just nasty little things that you're going to say to the other person, knowing very well that that's hurtful? Why are you doing that? What is that about? Or does the love you have for the other person should be taking front row here and saying, oof, no, I better swallow that one before it comes out. And it may be misinterpreted. It may be a stupid joke that I'm trying to make that is not a joke, and so on and so forth.
I get that. It's a matter of perspective as well. For some people, it is love that kind of holds the reins of the relationships. For others, it's logic. For other, it's common sense. You see, it varies according to where we come from and our background. But I will also add, even love is different for everyone. You see, for some people, love meaning being tough and being hurtful. It's not healthy, maybe, but this is how they conceive love. So I think it goes back to how they were brought up, the environment they were in, the baggage they bring with them, and their definition of taking care of others.
Good point. Never thought about it that way. I always thought that love was the first line of conduct. And yeah, you may have moments, like everybody has frustration moments or whatever, where things get away from you, but it is not how you behave in life. To me, it's always been you behave first and foremost with love, and then, the rest follows. But So that's an interesting, you just opened a window here for me.
I like that, opening windows.
I was just going to follow up on some of what Nadzin was saying, and to add that for some people, behaving in a way that could be perceived as cruel or unkind by another person may be an act of self-defense for them that we're not aware of. So it may, passive aggressive comment or whatever, may be their way of lashing out because they perceive some sort of hurt or something there, or a form of avoiding rejection. It could be so many different things, which does not preclude the fact that they could love the other person. It just means that there's a lot of trauma within themselves, let's say, that they haven't dealt with, and this is onto it. Because I don't think, other than a complete sociopath, there's no one's kind of born that way. Like, nobody is born hateful. So I think that unless we know all their past and all their trajectory, it's hard for us to tell where it's coming from. And it doesn't mean we have to take it either. Like,
Yes.
that's the thing. It doesn't mean that you can't be all empathetic and say, oh, I don't know why this person's treating me so badly, but they must have some trauma, so I'm just going to take it. No.
Well, yes. So meaning, because I'm a strong person, I need to take your crap. And that's okay. It's too bad because you end up losing out on all the good things that come with that relationship, and which are far greater than the not so good things. But you don't have a choice. In the end, you have to do what you have to do because you know that this is not going to stop here. You come to the realization that, okay, this is the way it is. And if I go on, I have to be ready to take, you know. So
this has been an interesting discussion.
yes.
A lot of people can relate, I'm sure, to a lot of the things we've talked about today. So I thank you for bringing it up. I think there's a lot of material here that I think touches everybody's lives. So good one.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
See you next time. Find out more at www.mentalizeacademy.com